He's known for his literary prowess, sharp oratory, and impactful commentary. One of the most prominent voices on politics globally, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, has published 26 bestsellers, and his 27th has been unveiled. Dr. Tharoor, welcome to NDTV. And in this conversation, my colleague Nikunj Garg will be joining us.
Hi Nikunj, hello Marya. Yes, my living constitution, our living constitution is before you.
From biographies to memoirs to commentaries on the British Empire, and then you had the great Indian novel as well. It's been quite a range and very, very diverse at the same time. In just 6 months, you have moved from wonderland of words to the living constitution. May I ask you, are you keeping with the trend? Because constitution is quite in a vogue these days.
It is, and you know, the 75th anniversary of the constitution came by, and my publisher immediately got on the phone and said, we need a book on this. And I said, come on, man, everyone's talked about it. No, you must do something. So I put aside what I was working on and turned to this. But in fact, it was fun and worthwhile to do, because the problem is everyone cites the constitution, hardly anyone reads it. And you can't let the constitution just be something for lawyers and scholars and academics. It's got to be something that ordinary people who read newspaper editorials, as it were, can come to grips with, understand what it means to them. And that's what this book tries to do. It's a simple, rather concise introduction, but it touches all the bases, from how many words there are in the Constitution to how many articles and how many, what's in it. So all the basics are there. But at the same time, it's got my own point of view and my own commentary and some of the big issues that have arisen out of the Constitution in the last 77 years.
It's interesting, Mr. Tharoor, you say that a lot of people talk about Constitution. Hardly anybody reads it. Is it about some in your party?
Now, I'm referring to the fact that now our Prime Minister has been going around saying the Constitution is his only holy book, which is a remarkable statement. And I think in some ways we have to accept that there's been a huge change in the entire Hindutva ecosystem, which at the time of 1947 to 50 rejected the Constitution, and for reasons that they gave, spelt out in detail at that time, that I can summarize for you. Today, they are the biggest defenders of the Constitution. They swear by it. Mr. Mohan Bhagwat has made a speech saying he supports the Constitution and that no one can challenge the Constitution. The Prime Minister says it's his holy book. There's an annual celebration now in Samvidhan Divas in Parliament. It's suddenly become unchallengeable. And that in many ways is welcome, because that's what a Constitution should be. But if you go back to the 40s and 50s, there were various objections from the Hindutva ecosystem. First of all, they said, everything is wrong with this. It's written in the wrong language. It's full of Western ideas. It doesn't even understand anything about the soul of India. And on top of that, as Deen Dayal Upadhyaya, their most thoughtful ideologue, said, because Golwalkar's criticism, things like, no, nothing from the Manusmriti in it and so on, which is a different matter. Ambedkar had burned the Manusmriti, he was not likely to quote it. But Deen Dayal Upadhyaya said, listen, the whole fundamental premise that's wrong about this constitution is it assumes that a constitution is written for a territory and all the people on it. He says, wrong, a constitution should be written for a people. And the people of India are the Hindu people. So the fundamental flaw is this is not a constitution for a Hindu India. Now, these are so fundamentally different a view from what animated the people, the founding fathers and mothers who wrote the Constitution of India, that one has to find some common ground, and there seemed to be none for many, many years. What's very interesting is the way in which the Hindutva ecosystem has evolved. They've abandoned this idea and they've accepted the fact that the Constitution speaks for all Indians, and it is the vehicle to take India forward. So that, to my mind, is one of the most significant developments that we have seen in the course of the time. But that doesn't mean that all the debates are over. There are very many debates inherent in the Constitution and that have begun to take place in the decades since, which will continue. And that's why it's a living Constitution. We've had 106 amendments. Changes will come. There'll be new generations will have new ideas, and these will all be sorted out by new judges and all of that. So it's a living, thriving, throbbing document. But I find it very interesting that it's been the successful and now consensual framework for taking our national adventure forward.
So is it the evolution of the Hindutva ecosystem, or is it the maturing of our democracy?
Both.
That Constitution becomes the bedrock of our democracy, and none can challenge it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was always the case, but the fear was that as the Hindutva ecosystem acquired greater political prominence, I mean, no one worried about the rejection of it by Golwalkar or Deen Dayal Upadhyaya when they represented 2-3% of the vote, and even less in terms of seats in parliament. But when they became a significant force in national politics in the 80s and 90s, suddenly their view of the constitution became very important. And people began asking, is Hindutva compatible with the constitution? Is Hindutva going to rewrite the constitution? Some of you may remember that when Mr. Modi came to power in 2014, there were widespread reports that Mr. Govindacharya was writing a Hindu constitution to replace the existing one. All that talk is over now. In the second and third terms of the Modi government, no one is talking about rewriting the constitution, replacing the constitution. They are talking about making the constitution work better. And to my mind, this is a very major positive development in the history of the constitution.
Then how do you think the evolution balances between what are the guiding principles, or should I say foundational principles, with the need for necessary reforms?
So the foundational principles are very clear. It talks about the classic liberty, equality, fraternity. And fraternity was very important to Ambedkar. He inserted that word because he said we don't have a sense of brotherhood and sisterhood amongst us thanks to the caste system. So it was important, he said, to overcome that. That's certainly been a recurrent motif throughout the 8 decades almost of the Constitution. Second, there is the tension between federalism and states' rights and the centre. Ironically, because the word federal doesn't occur anywhere in the Constitution. We have written a federal Constitution without using the word federal. But there are all these issues, and they keep popping up in different shapes and forms. And latest now is, of course, the effort by Mr. Stalin and Tamil Nadu to bring the federal issues right up center state. That's an important issue. There is a question of the delimitation. Indira Gandhi froze it for 25 years. Vajpayee Saab came and froze it for another 25 years. Now many states are demanding that Mr. Modi should also freeze it for another 25 years so we don't open up a can of worms. The can of worms being that you would suddenly get yourselves a 2/3 majority for the Hindi-speaking states, and the rest of the country would feel disempowered and disenfranchised. You can't risk that for national unity. Find another solution. One other solution could be, for example, to actually reflect populations more in the local Vidhan Sabhas and give them more power. So that, yes, it may be unfair in Parliament that I'm representing 2 million people in Thiruvananthapuram and there is some poor chap in UP representing 2.9 million people. Why should he have 50% more voters to be accountable to? And you can say that's not democratic, it's not fair. But it keeps the country united. Therefore, instead of having, say, 7 MLAs, let him have 10 MLAs. Let there be more people there to do the work at the bottom level. So these are all ideas that we can discuss further. Then there's ongoing debates about the Uniform Civil Code. There are ongoing debates about the ways in which the judiciary is self-perpetuating, the national judicial accountability argument. So there are many, many pending issues, none of which are going to be resolved overnight. Things will take over time. And the wonderful thing about our document is it keeps evolving. But people who read this book will get a basic understanding and a basic framework through which they can follow the future newspaper debates of years to come.
And Mr. Tharoor, when you say that today the Constitution has sort of become more acceptable and nobody is talking in Mr. Modi's third term about rewriting it, would you give Mr. Rahul Gandhi credit for this? Mr.
Rahul Gandhi has made this very big points in the last election, particularly Samvidhan Khatre mein hai, because he was talking particularly about the threat to reservations. There have been some stray statements by people in and around the ruling party which seemed to suggest that. And so that became an issue, and it certainly influenced some votes in northern India in particular, I think, amongst OBC voters and others. I think that issue has now been laid to rest, and that the government, having seen the danger, has adopted the same approach, and they have now voted to conduct a caste census as well. So I think we are probably moving away from that particular set of concerns right now.
How long do you think we can delay delimitation? Is it not the need of the hour?
Arguably, you can do it forever. I mean, there's no cast in stone reason as to why you need to adopt it. Because you see, demographics change from time to time. Why we have the problem we have today is because over the last 50 years, the southern states, plus one or two others, have improved their human development indicators, empowered their women, thereby reduced the number of births per woman, thereby reduced the population as a whole. Had there been a census in 2021, Kerala would have lost population from 2011. In 2031, you'll find Andhra Pradesh will also have followed Kerala in losing population. Many of the southern states have focused heavily on human development. Now, if you're going to punish them for doing a good thing, by depriving them of political clout, they're going to say, why do we want to be part of the system? So that's the danger of taking delimitation further. There is another way of looking at it, which is let the states all have the balance they're comfortable with and have been comfortable with for 50 years, but let's deepen the situation in other ways, like, for example, more seats in the Vidhan Sabha. There's also the question of, could we not decentralize more authorities to the states? There's a tussle always between the powers of the center and the powers of the states. I think Mr. Modi, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, was a very strong advocate of decentralization of powers, including financial powers, to the state governments. But as Prime Minister, he's a much more, the old cliche about where you stand depends on where you sit. Now that he's sitting in Lok Kalyan Marg, he's much more in favor of central control. So we'll have to see, Marya. But these are debates that will have to play themselves out in practice and possibly over future generations of politicians. We can't solve everything forever right now. If Mr. Nehru and company in the 1950s thought they had settled something that would last forever, well, there are 106 amendments to prove them wrong. Absolutely. The truth is, things move on, will evolve. I might add that, in fact, if you really look at so many different solutions that are possible, we could have gone for delimitation of Lok Sabha by completely revamping the Rajya Sabha. Look how the Americans did it. They said we'll raise the seats according to population in the House of Congress, the lower house. But the Senate will remain permanently fixed at 2 seats per state. So it doesn't matter if your entire state population is less than 1 lakh. You still get 2 seats, 2 senators. And it doesn't matter if your population like California is 65 million, you still get, say, 2 senators. So you actually end up in a situation where the Senate becomes the equalizing mechanism. Now, you could have done something similar in India. You could have said that, all right, it's true that Tamil Nadu will lose seats by comparison with UP, for argument's sake. But it doesn't matter if they want to just bulldoze a constitutional amendment through, you can stop it in the Rajya Sabha / Senate because you'll have the same number of seats as UP. Now, that could be a counter-argument. But all of this requires, number one, constitutional imagination, and number 2, political will. And in many ways, the simplest way of getting political will is just postponing a decision for another 25 years and let another generation deal with it down the road.
What do you think is the biggest strength, Mr. Tharoor, of our constitution?
It's adaptability. It's adaptability. One of the things that some people think is a weakness of the Constitution is the fact that it's been adapted and amended so many times. I disagree. I think it's a strength of the Constitution. The fact that we could bring in 106 amendments without destroying the Constitution and at the same time allowing it to evolve and give more depth to the rights.
But that is because the Supreme Court said that you can't touch the basic fundamentals of the Constitution.
The basic structure remains. And in fact,
because politicians would have wanted their way.
And only the Supreme Court can tell you what the basic structure is, which is another difficult thing to. So when you go with litigation, you have no idea if they're going to come up with a judgment saying, sorry, you made a good case, but this is violative of the basic structure. They can do that. And this again is a new doctrine which didn't exist somewhere else in some other country, but frankly, this is all fascinating. To me, it's all part of the magic of the Constitution. Ambedkar said in his closing speech back in 49, he said, look, it doesn't matter how good a constitution is, if it's operated by bad people, it'll be a bad constitution. It doesn't matter how bad the draft is, if it's operated by good people, it'll be a good constitution. So a lot depends on the goodness, the quality of all of us Indians in how we are operating the Constitution.
And Dr. Tharoor, you discussed the role of institutions in upholding constitutional values. And we are discussing the independence of institutions in these times. Then how do you uphold constitutional values?
See, institutional values are inherent in the nature of the institutions themselves. In other words, there's no point having an election commission if it's not completely independent, right? So the independence of the election commission is vital. You could argue that you need similar independence and autonomy for many of the investigative agencies. That if investigative agencies are seen as instruments of the government to the day, that their investigations will not be trusted. You need institutions such as the Right to Information Commission, the Information Commission of India, to be completely independent, because the whole idea is the ordinary citizen is asking for information, in a sense, against his government. So if the Information Commission is a handmaiden of the government, it will not give information that the citizen wants. So some of these things are built into the nature of the institution you create. Now, a government department, by definition, is not an autonomous institution. It's part of the government. An autonomous institution, by definition, has got to be different. And this culture of integrity and accountability evolves over time. It's very interesting. When India first became independent in the 50s, no one really understood what the balance of power would be, because under the British, the executive had been dominant. The British viceroy pretty much called all the shots, right? Then Mahatma Gandhi is assassinated, Sardar Patel dies. Nehruji becomes almost, if he wants to be the viceroy. He was that powerful a figure in India. Now, he's a slightly short-tempered guy, so he gives an intemperate press release, press conference, in which he attacks a judge by name.
Yes.
Imagine what that could have done to the balance between the executive and the judiciary, except for Nehru. By the end of the day, he writes an abject letter of apology to the judge, saying he should never have done that. Then he goes further. He writes a letter to the Chief Justice of India, saying, I was wrong to have insulted the judiciary. I had no right to do so. Now, Nehru didn't need to do that. He was powerful enough to get away with anything. He did it to demonstrate that the institution of the judiciary was independent from him and needed shoring up and respecting now in the early stages, so people would learn to respect its independence. These are the kinds of things that people forget about our history. We built up these institutions through the efforts and sacrifices of the Nehrus of that time.
You sound like a Nehruvian, Mr. Dr. Tharoor.
In many ways, I suppose I am, yeah.
And it's a dangerous preoccupation these days.
Well, I've never been uncritical. If you've read my biography of Nehru, I have found a lot to praise and admire, and above all, the extraordinary mind of the man, but I've also been critical of some of his policy choices.
Dr. Tharoor, the last book was for a particular reader. These 108 pages, let's talk about this. 111 pages, and what's your target reader?
The target reader is the ordinary thinking Indian, the kind of person who reads newspaper editorials and articles, who wants to know a little more, but is not at all planning to be a lawyer or a scholar or study academic judgments in great detail, but wants to have a general idea of what the Constitution is all about, what are the principles and rights it enshrines, what does it give us, how does it matter to ordinary Indians like you and me, that sort of thing. So as I said in the launch event, I've written this book as a thinking Indian for other thinking Indians, not for experts. It's a concise introduction. It's concise because it's short, 111 pages. It's an introduction because it does lay out all the basics. So you'll find all the basic facts about the Constitution are there. Anything that you would need to go on Google to find out otherwise. But then you would actually have some commentary, some analysis from my perspective of what I judge to be the most important issues around the Constitution.
But Dr. Tharoor, are Indians thinking enough?
Probably.
Or do you think they need to think better, think more, and think more of a future for the country where we should be in times to come? Quite clearly, we are now nearing almost 100 years of this country's independence in a few decades from now. So do you think Indians are thinking enough?
Nikunj, it's very interesting. I would say that we are thinking, but are we thinking in complex enough terms, and are we thinking in long-term enough terms? The big worry that I have more and more, and I worry more about the younger generation too, is that attention spans are shrinking. We have become a WhatsApp culture. We read, and some people angrily defend against my arguments by saying, well, they're reading just as much as your generation did, but they're reading on a screen. You read on a page. What's the difference? The difference is that the pages were usually more complex. It required more in-depth engagement, took more time, made you go into the details of an argument. WhatsApp, unfortunately, is a series of short bites. It gives you immediate temporary gratification. I don't know how much it leaves behind in your head. And it also has a lot of misinformation. Context is missing, depth is missing, complication is missing. So that's my first big worry. Secondly, you say, what about thinking for the future? We have become very much a present obsessed culture. We're all about today, and if we think of tomorrow, it means tomorrow. It doesn't mean tomorrow in the philosophical sense of future generations. No, it means tomorrow. So that's the kind of thing that I worry about, because I was in a sense lucky, I realized with hindsight, that I grew up in an India without television, without Nintendo, without PlayStation, without mobile phones, without WhatsApp, without Insta. I grew up having to engage with books. Whatever intellect I developed because I didn't have a choice, perhaps. These kids have a choice, and I believe they're making the wrong choice.
You believe that they're making the wrong choice?
Yeah, I mean, those who are still reading and engaging with more serious books, and there are many Indians like that, all power to them. I happily applaud.
But you are equally active on X and also on Instagram.
One has to be, because you also want to reach the people who aren't reading your books. I mean, let's face it, Marya, an interview with you will get me 1 million views. A book I write, if it's the biggest bestseller, might sell 20,000, 30,000 copies in the first few months. So we're not talking about a comparison. If you want to reach large numbers of people, you have to engage with 21st century technologies. Video, YouTube, Instagram, television, all of these things are also essential. But they shouldn't be the only thing.
All right. Dr. Tharoor, let's shift focus now to Prime Minister Narendra Modi engaging with the nation through his address to the nation. Do you think it was needed?
Yeah.
And particularly at a time when there's a lot of misinformation and also some kind of narrative setting which is happening by the Pakistanis and the Western media?
I think certainly it's always needed. I think it's a duty of a Prime Minister to speak to his people from time to time. He does this monthly broadcast on Man Ki Baat, but that's not really topical, urgent, critical stuff. It's more reflective in general. I think that actually coming on television, looking the nation square in the eye and talking about the big issues on the top of their minds is always important. Whether it was COVID, whether it's war, we needed him to do that, so I'm glad he did it. The question of the narrative, I don't think that he particularly addressed the other people's narrative at all. He talked about what we were trying to do, what we believe we've accomplished, and how determined we are in the future. That message is good. I don't think there was anything terribly new or surprising. Certainly people like us who've been following Indian policy have been saying more or less all of this. I was very pleased to see one of my lines had caught the attention of his speechwriters, because he used it. When I said that the Prime Minister had said this is not an era of war, and I had added in my Indian Express article 2 weeks ago, but it is not an era of terrorism either. That line made it to the PM speech, so I felt chuffed about that. I mean, that's also a right message, right? But anyway, to cut a long story short, I will say that the PM should do this. He should do it every time there's a moment of crisis. But as far as the global narrative is concerned, there are people below his level who should be doing it. The global narrative is shaped by various factors. It is shaped by the interests and the self-interests of governments, and by the interests and the proclivities of the media organizations. And if it so happens that there are some media organizations that have a habit of inviting a lot more Pakistani guests than they invite ours, you will get a particular point of view. And at the same time, if there are media organizations that are willing to give us the time and space to be heard, we should leap onto those, because we cannot entirely rely on the fact that we've issued the right statements from here. Are people hearing them in their own countries, in their own languages, and their own TV stations? These are important issues.
And do you think, Dr. Tharoor, that the way Prime Minister and his government handled this entire crisis, including the communication, I will not call narrative, which is increasingly becoming a much contested word, including the communication to the larger world and people, Indian people, that was largely in the right direction?
Look, I think that the overall crisis was handled extremely well. I have gone on record as saying that I thought Operation Sindoor, from the naming to the presentation to the conduct, everything I gave full marks to. I mean, I really liked the fact that we hit the terrorist bases. We did so at night when there were very few civilians likely to be wandering about, so no collateral damage. We were very precise in our targeting. I'm told we hit a specific building inside the LET compound. I like that. I thought that sending the message that, look, in Kargil, we never even crossed the LOC, even though it cost us lives. In Uri, we crossed the LOC. In Balakot, we crossed the international border. And today, after Pahalgam, we are now hitting you in your heartland. So be prepared that we are not prepared to take any more of this. The more you do, the more consequences you're going to face. I think all that messaging was very clear, and the Pakistanis have got the message. Did the world community get the message? not unchallenged, because the Pakistanis were going around telling everybody, oh my gosh, the Indians are a rogue state, we did nothing, they were attacking us without any provocation. And when we say, but look at this Pahalgam, they say, we didn't do Pahalgam, where is the evidence? And indeed, many foreign interviewers are badgering us to say, where is your evidence, where is your evidence? To which all we could say is, where was the evidence that Osama bin Laden was there until they found him? You know, where was the evidence that they had done 26/11 until Qasab was captured alive? The problem is denial is the Pakistani modus operandi. So I have no doubt that a meticulously planned operation like this came out of a sophisticated military headquarters. It's not some random, crazy doing something. But I believe that though we have paused this operation now, and this pause will last long, I believe that we still have to go after the individuals who perpetrated Pahalgam. We seem to have identified 3 of the 4 of them by name. We have to go after them and get them. And that, whatever it takes, however long it takes, is something that is indispensable for India's self-respect to achieve.
All right, Dr. Tharoor, pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much, and wishing you all the best with the living constitution.
Thank you. Let's wish ourselves all the best.
As always, very eloquent commentary, Dr. Tharoor.
Thank you so much, Nikunj. Thank you, Marya. All the best.